Welcome to the New Voices. We're here in Washington, D.C., and today we're going to be looking at fracking and electric vehicles. We're going to be looking at food versus fuel. What's that about? We're going to be looking at cellulosic fuels. Where are they? What are they? And what are those gallons we've been hearing about? Joining us as a special guest today will be Jan Koninckx, straight from DuPont, and our regular panelists are here with me as we explore the new science of the new materials. We're going to get, first of all, into the question of fracking, and we're going to get into electric vehicles. What's the point of having a renewable transport fuel these days when we could frack our way to energy security, and electric vehicles are going to give us all the protection on emissions that, you know, we're ever going to need? That's the rumor out there. Is that true? Rebecca, what do you think?
It's interesting because I get this question quite often. Why bother with renewable fuels? In the business I'm in, we're introducing a new fuel, DME, dimethyl ether. Why bother? Don't we have enough choices? And one of the things that is key for everyone to remember is that diversity is important. So let's just take electric, for example. So if we switch all our passenger car vehicles, all of our heavy-duty vehicles to electric, which isn't quite possible today, there's still some technical challenges, then we just switch from being beholden to one source of energy, oil, to all electric. So then we put all the pressure on the grid, for example. And we know there's still challenges with the stability of the grid. Upgrades still need to be made. And we think back, I'm based in San Diego, and so just a few years ago, we had a blackout that affected Arizona, Southern California, down to Tijuana, and this lasted for quite a while. And we look back to 2003 when the Northeast had a blackout that affected 55 million people.
And you see all these stranded cars everywhere all over the world.
Exactly.
You know, just everyone stops where they are.
Right, and so we're just switching from everyone being on one source of energy to another. So I think it's important to remember that the diversity is key. And there's an interesting book, Turning Oil into Salt. And what they talk about is how salt used to have a strategic stronghold on the world. And then refrigeration was invented. And so it's not that we don't use as much salt today. We actually, in fact, use more. But now it doesn't have a strategic stronghold on us.
We don't use it in our cars anymore, right? So
and I think what we're missing here, though, is obviously economics matters. So biofuels, in many measures, is just taking solar energy and CO2 out of the sky. That's the basic feedstock for biofuels, combining it with H2O, putting it through a very simple process of a few months, and ending up with a high-performance fuel. And what people often don't appreciate is the average octane in fuel coming out of oil refineries today cannot operate your car. It's only 84 octane. How do you get to 87 octane or 89 or that expensive stuff, the 91? You put in ethanol. It's 113 octane. Indy race cars run on 0 gasoline petroleum because they need more performance. They need high octane. They run on 100% alcohol.
Yeah, did you see the news about the new solar plane that's coming out? They actually are flying a solar plane around the world. I think it's going to take 180 days to actually get around the world. Is that what it is? Around the world in 180 days? And you can only take one pilot at a time, so they actually have to land because it can only carry like 100 pounds, but it's apparently as wide as a 747 and weighs half the so it looks like maybe the solar plane isn't quite in our future.
It brings up a good point about electric cars. Energy density matters. And if you're going to take an F-18 and fly it on batteries, it's going to be a pretty big F-18 because the batteries have an energy density that's 120 times different than what you would have if you were going to have the kind of high-performance fuel that a jet airplane flies on. So biofuels are very dense, very storable, very transportable, and quite frankly, can be produced from renewable sources. Yeah. So when we talk about fracking, for example, you're talking about a very high-cost domestic source of fuel. We also have a low-cost domestic source of high-performance fuel. Happens to be ethanol, and biodiesel come from domestic sources as well. I agree completely with Rebecca. It's about diversity. And I think our goals should be focused on energy independence and the military benefits that have to do with us not having to be reliant upon some of our enemies to fuel our own military machine. And those kind of goals, I think, trump cost in some cases. The cost of our military budget to protect our foreign fuel supply should be shown at the pump, but it's not. It's shown in our tax bill. So we're paying for some of our fuel through our tax bill, paying for some of it at the pump.
What about range anxiety? We haven't talked about range anxiety.
Well, I don't think range anxiety is it's in the mind. I don't think it's a real thing. I mean, 95% of journeys in the US are less than 30 miles. It's not scary, like the average journey is about 8 miles. So, I mean, even the Nissan Leaf today can do 80 or 90 miles. People wouldn't buy them because they're scared about range.
So that's perception.
Yeah, and I think you need to think about, in the long-term picture, though, in theory, there will be hydrogen cars. I mean, hydrogen is something we haven't talked about, but EVs and hydrogen are things that car companies are really pushing, not in the same way they are both biofuels. I think there's a difference because biofuels is not a consumer choice. It's often something that's already in the fuel. How many people in the US realize that they're driving on 10% ethanol? I imagine very few. With electric vehicles, hydrogen cars, natural gas vehicles as well, it's the consumer choice. And that means it's difficult to predict, but it also could completely take off.
So the argument is that because fracking technology has arrived after many years of development, and because we are fracking our way to being energy secure, and we don't need any kinds of alternative, whether it's electrics or other renewable fuels. Eric, what you've been in the oil and gas business, you're a recovering oil investor. Why aren't you back there fracking your way to happiness? What happened?
Fracking is terrific, and I do have some very large investments in fracking companies, and they're very successful. Interestingly enough, we're fracking in Argentina. Largest frack opportunity is the Vaca Muerta, which stands for dead cow field in Argentina. Yeah. And that's where the kind of fracking technology matches up with national interest. The Argentinians set an artificial price of crude oil that's higher than the world price because they've been spending $15 billion importing crude oil into the country and natural gas into the country. And they have an energy independence problem. Interestingly, much like the U.S. And so I think it's a question of do we want a country that can be more dependent on OPEC, more dependent on these imported fuels, export more of our cash to create economic growth elsewhere? Or are we a country that's trying to use our natural solar energy, and which indirectly is electricity for electric cars, CO2 absorbed out of the atmosphere going through photosynthesis to make biofuels? Are we focused on the feedstocks we actually physically have? By the way, I love the P85D. It's Elon Musk's new high-performance twin electric motor car. Fantastic performance, 3.2 seconds to 60 miles an hour. Fantastic car. We need to solve a range anxiety issue because I would not drive that car across the United States with my family. But I also wouldn't fly an airplane across the United States anytime soon either. So we have a very diverse transportation requirement, and to say that everything's going to be electric tomorrow is not, frankly, reflecting reality.
So diversity, that's the takeaway for this particular.
And oil's not going anywhere. Oil's going to be a part of the mix, and so it's important that we're not saying this is going to go away, but we're just trying to break the strategic stronghold oil has on us here in the U.S.
Okay, we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back and talk a little bit about food versus fuel on the New Voices. Stay with us. Welcome back to the New Voices. I'm Jim Lane, Biofuels Digest, and we're here with our expert panel to talk about food versus fuel. Eric, what is the argument, first of all? Can you summarize what most people think of when they think of what does that argument say? What's it about? Why are we talking about that, and why is it important to talk about it a little bit more?
There's been a perception that corn in the U.S. is being consumed to go into our vehicles. So we have a food known as corn that goes into a fuel that can otherwise come from a petroleum source. The misnomer is there's actually a lower cost of corn today than when the federal policy called the Renewable Fuel Standard was passed in 2007.
So the World Health Organization has said that we have to cut our sugar content from 16% down to 10%. So your idea is to give the 6% to your friendly car.
I think our friendly car is very good at eating glucose. Now, indirectly, of course, it's because glucose was fed to yeast,
right,
and yeast converted into ethanol.
So it's kind of, you store it there, that way you're not tempted. It's like putting in a fridge with a lockbox. You can't actually get to that nasty sugar, and all good things.
It's a great source of energy, and our cars can use it, which is what's interesting. I think there's also a very important part. This is an academic, but also policy question, which is how do you calculate indirect land use?
Okay.
And the models on how you calculate it have changed dramatically in the last year or so, as academics have taken another view of what happens when you grow 1 acre of corn in Kansas and 1 acre of, let's say, sugarcane in Brazil. And the theoretical models used to treat those different. Every year you'd grow an acre of corn in Kansas, they would take an acre of Amazon rainforest and knock it down in the model. But every year you'd grow an acre of sugarcane in Brazil, you would not knock down an acre of Amazon rainforest. It was just a part of the model is, well, there's a lot of real estate in Brazil you're not using, so you can grow 100 million acres of sugarcane, it's not going to have any impact on anybody. It was indirect land use change that was inconsistent. The new models have become much more consistent, which is let's get a
metric on this. So when we're talking about this corn plant by weight, let's take away the cob and the leaves and all that, right, and just focus on the kernels. Right. As a percentage, how much is actually going into the vehicle? What's the sugar fraction there? Is it 50%? Is it
72% of the corn kernel ends up in the vehicle, 28% ends up in animal feed.
Okay.
And so out of the corn crop in the United States, only about 22% of it actually physically ends up going into your car. The other 78% is
so 22% goes in the car. Now, we got another stat that just came in recently, and again, this was coming from the UN, I believe, that 33% of all food is actually wasted.
Which is just a shame.
That is a shame.
And I think that's also, you know, biofuels, people think about the argument food versus fuel, but what they don't really understand is in the advanced biofuel economy where we're sitting, people are really focused on monetizing waste streams.
Okay.
And so taking food waste out of the landfill, so about a third of our landfills are filled with organics that could be used for something, because if you just leave them there, those pieces of food or organic matter, they'll decompose and they'll release methane and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And these are very harmful to the ozone layer. So taking that, which is harming our environment, take that, converting it to fuel is one waste stream. But you think about wood waste that happens when you have diseased forests, you have all this wood, that's a problem. You think about gas that's being flared, carbon dioxide that's being emitted, all of these landfill gas, wastewater treatment gas, these are all possible sources of feedstock to make fuel. So that's what's important, is that advanced biofuels is able to monetize these and take something that's a problem and run our vehicles.
Now, are we taking it from the landfill? Are we taking it further up the chain? Are we going to the Winn-Dixie and doing a deal with them? Or aren't you working with Safeway?
Yeah, so we actually have a grant with Safeway and Volvo Trucks where we're initially testing commercial DME-powered trucks. So this fuel that replaces diesel, combusts in a diesel engine, but it burns cleaner. There's no soot. And long-term, the goal is that we would look at opportunities where they have food that's expiring in the grocery store every day, and they bring it back to the distribution center. So now it can be used for composting, but there's even a more powerful use of it. If we can take that food waste, decompose it to methane and carbon dioxide, and convert it to this fuel DME that can then power their trucks.
I think the US is quite far behind in this, actually. Like looking at the European market, organic waste, I mean, the amount of landfill waste that can be used for biofuels and anaerobic digestion is running out. I think in the UK, we've now got, by 2016, we'll be using up all of the available landfill for energy, because there's been a huge build out of energy plants.
Yeah, those rising seas aren't helping either. Isn't England like sinking at this point slowly into the? Which way is it going? Which part of England is?
I think it's going.
Is it the London side or?
Yeah, it's the London side.
Okay, so those lovely beaches in Cornwall are pretty safe for a while. Okay.
They're rising out of the.
Yeah, but they're getting palm trees out there now. Climate change is bringing.
And wine, really good champagne.
Yeah, really good champagne. So climate change actually brings some good stuff. You know, better waves and more palm trees in Cornwall. So that's good.
Yeah.
Okay. So what kind of technologies are besides Oberon Fuels are using waste? Are there any that are?
I would argue that the first generation, which did have this food versus fuel argument, as I think everybody knows, only 1% of corn is the sweet corn that you eat. 99% is an industrial product called feed corn that makes plastics and a bunch of other things. That's still first generation. Second generation is take the waste products from those agricultural feedstock streams, corn cobs, corn stalks, known as corn stover, is a very large supply of glucose. There's actually sugar inside of the corn stalks.
And that's the famed cellulosic fuels that we've heard.
Cellulosic fuels, which I think we all believe now not only have technologies at work, but now are getting some investment support for being expanded as the next generation.
Well, we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back after and look at this whole topic of cellulosic. Is there really the technology there now? Is it ready for prime time? We'll be back. Stay with us. Welcome back to The New Voices. I'm Jim Lane, Biofuels Digest, and we're joined in this segment by Jan Koninckx of DuPont. We're going to talk about cellulosic fuels. And Jan, The rumor is that cellulosic fuels are 5 years away, and they always will be 5 years away. First of all, is that true? And secondly, what is it?
Jim, it's simply not true. Biofuels from biomass are here. And we've worked on this for many years with a lot of success. We've made a lot of steps forward. We've developed a supply chain. We've developed the technology. We're building the plants. We're starting up these plants. It's right here. It's going to be a big fuel. It's going to be a big supply chain for the U.S. It's going to be a great offering for American fuel consumers.
Now, starting out, what kind of feedstocks are you using? What kind of we're talking about residues. What does that mean?
We're starting out with something that's called corn stover, and corn stover is basically everything that's left on the field after the corn grain harvest. So farmers do their harvest, they leave behind the hay or stover, as they call it, and that is what we come and pick up. They can't do anything with it. It's basically in their way for the next operation, and we use it and we convert it into ethanol.
So what are they doing with it right now?
Right now they plow it under, and that's really, we call it now landfilling. I mean, basically they landfill their stover, which is not what they should do. It just promotes the production of more CO2 quicker. So in fact, we're better picking up the stover and turning it into fuel and making it into something useful.
So we pick it up. How far can we carry it before economically this is just an unviable thing? It sounds like an awful lot of weight.
Yeah, we're building a large plant in Iowa right now, and this plant will start up later this year. It collects corn stover from roughly 40 miles around there. Most of the stover, of course, comes from closer, but we go up to about 40 miles away.
Now, the other kinds of residues, we've heard about municipal solid waste. Is that those kinds of, are those possible technologies?
Sure, absolutely. And we have a facility in Tennessee where we've developed this technology and put it to point. We've been running it for the last several years, since 2009. And in that facility, we've used multiple different feedstocks. Switchgrass, which can be grown on land that is not really adaptable for agriculture. We've used sorghum. We use the residue of sugarcane processing, what they call bagasse. So many feedstocks can be used. We use corn stover first because it's abundant in the U.S. and collecting it really works with agriculture. And so since we know agriculture well as a company, as DuPont, we've used that feedstock first.
So basically, this is 2015. This is the year of Back to the Future. We're all supposed to be able to take garbage and put it in our cars and run it off. So I assume that you've invented the flux capacitor at this point. Is that basically where we are?
There's that, and there's a little bit of intrigue involved in that in the script. But really, it's actually even much more fascinating than the movie. The science of this is phenomenal, but it works well. The supply chain is sustainable. This helps the farmer. This is really nothing but pluses. It's a great technology. I'm excited to work on it.
And I think that there's been a policy misinterpretation in which the economic crisis of 2008, which slowed down institutional investment in this technology,
that's what I heard. It slowed us down a little bit.
Is being misinterpreted as the technology somehow is not being deployed or actively pursued. As you can see, DuPont and other companies are actively pursuing technologies that are now commercial. And what's the next phase, which is what policy makers should be paying attention to, is the next phase, not the last phase, is heavier institutional investment, deployment of this technology through licensing, not only domestic but foreign use of cheap feedstock strains that are currently just becoming CO2 as was described here. So this is now a growth cycle, and you don't want to inhibit a growth cycle by changing policies, which tells investors you don't know what the future is going to look like. I don't know, are you going to need this fuel, not need the fuel? Are there tax credits, not tax credits? You need consistent policy. You need a solid platform for people to build upon, not sort of a quicksand that's constantly moving depending on whatever press release came out last week.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember as well as when, let's just take for example the EPA with their renewable fuel standard, they put out these goals on cellulosic gallons. And one of the things that's important when they put out these goals, entrepreneurs and innovators are going to rise to the occasion. They want cellulosic fuels, so they'll invent new technologies like he was talking about with DuPont. Other technologies would come out. So if they change, as Eric was saying, they change the rules in the middle of the game, then the investors get weary, innovators are demotivated to keep working on their technology, but people are doing that. And in the space I'm working in, for example, one of the fuels that was never considered was DME or dimethyl ether. That wasn't under the renewable fuel standard.
What is dimethyl ether? And it sounds like you're serving anesthetic to your car here. What is this?
That's diethyl ether.
There you go. Oh yeah. Okay. So yeah.
Drop a few carbons.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So it's something that combusts as a fuel. So just a molecule that combusts in a diesel engine. and it wasn't under the renewable fuel standard. So we actually had to go to the EPA, and they did a pathway review, and it's now under the renewable fuel standard. But it's just an example of how innovators will rise to the occasion because they put that target out for greater than 60%
What does
greenhouse
it behave
gas
like? I mean, in your vehicle, would it feel like just a standard diesel, or is it more like a LPG, or what? You know,
it has the combustion properties of diesel. So it's a high cetane number, 55 to 60. So compression ignites extraordinarily well, 100% DME, but it handles like propane.
okay.
So the fuel system is different. So you get the efficiency and the torque of a diesel engine, but you get this simplified handling with no cryogenics, no high compression of propane-like handling, which most people use in their barbecue grill today.
So that would be, because that's made from waste, so that's a cellulosic fuel as well.
I think an important point, though, and this is what DuPont, I think, is responding to, is there already is about 135 billion gallon gasoline market in the U.S. Average octane gasoline, only about 84 octane. When you go to the pump, there's no 84 on the pump. Your car isn't going to run on 84. So the product being made by DuPont and other cellulosic ethanol companies have an existing market, approximately 15 billion gallons in 2015 under the renewable fuel standard. That is a combination of traditional ethanol and this new cellulosic ethanol, which has lower carbon intensity and a lot of other benefits to our economy. That roadmap is already in place. For the next 7 years, all the way through 2022, the renewable fuel standard is telling investors and entrepreneurs, here is a bogey where we're going to continue to open up a market and be able to participate as a part of this 135 billion gallons of gasoline. The solid platform of that allows further investment in technology and commercialization. And that cellulosic ethanol technology is economic. Cheaper feedstocks, higher value products is very economic.
But I think the problem with cellulosic fuels is there is no obvious price for the final product. If you look at the wind or the solar industry, they are also risky technologies. They're expensive, hundreds of millions of dollars for a wind farm. But you can sign a 10-year PPA and you know what price you're going to get. The subsidy that you get in the US is probably half the production cost of the wind. So you're basically, you know you're going to make money. And I think with fuels, it's really tough to know what will the price be for your ethanol.
You're right. What we actually ask for in the policy that was provided for biofuels in general and advanced biofuels in particular is actually offers a lot less than some of the other alternative energies that have been commercialized, are now at scale, are cheap, and are plentiful available. And so all we ask is that the policy that was set in place is actually executed, and Eric, you pointed that out. You know, we've knocked down a number of big uncertainties: supply chain sustainability, technology, the projects, all of these things. The key uncertainty that's now left and actually has grown is the policy uncertainty.
Final question, Jan, where are we going to see it besides the U.S.? Is this going to be a global phenomenon? Is it going to be in Brazil? Is it going to be where?
No, absolutely. We'll see
2 or 3 countries.
We'll see this in Brazil. We're seeing it there now in Brazil, right? It's being commercialized there today. We'll see this in Asia. We'll see it in China in particular. We'll see it in Africa. We'll see it in Europe, and particularly in Eastern Europe.
Well, that's all we have time for tonight. Thank you for joining us on The New Voices. I'm Jim Lane, Biofuels Digest. We'll see you again next time.